Okay, I'm just recording our meeting here. So, well, Bob, let me get the ball rolling here, then I'll turn it over to you since we want to start this reasonably quickly. So, welcome everybody to our spring meeting virtually. Hopefully the last virtual meeting. I don't know.
Yes.
See what happens, but at least. And our guest is Bob Mills. Bob's going to give us a little bio here in a second, but Bob is a accomplished aviator. He's a Navy veteran, I believe, a Southwest guy. We won't hold that against him. He's retired, and he flies all sorts of exotic airplanes. It goes really, really fast. So it should be an interesting talk. So I'm going to turn the, see if I can do this host thingy, but it doesn't really matter because you're going to be the host right now. So there you are. And Bob Mills, you're on the air.
Oh, that's dangerous. Turning it over to a Navy guy. What are you going to do?
That's right.
So how many folks are online now?
Let's see, what do we got? Wait a minute, I gotta hit the right button. I thought this thing told me. Oh, 18 so far.
How many are you expecting?
Well, last time we had about 40, but they all kind of straggled in kind of late too.
Okay.
So,
and the background is it's all aircraft types. I know it's a very, very large EAA chapter. I don't know what the percentage of RVs is versus others, or.
well, let me fill you in. It's all RVs. So we actually are not an EAA chapter. We're the Twin Cities RV Builders Group. So we're not.
Oh, of course, I've been seeing it in emails all week, so I'm sorry.
Right. So we are all RV either builders or enthusiasts or something to that effect. So that's us.
Outstanding. Well, I'll have a couple of non-RV pictures in just for fun.
That's okay.
But and I got a ton of pictures, and if you guys get tired of seeing them, just tell me. You know, you can either go speed it up or give me the cut sign or whatever you think, Doug.
No, you're doing fine. You got an hour. Go for it.
Okay. And as Pete knows, all you have to do is pull my string and it won't stop.
Like so, the Shannon Cathy doll.
That's all right. And I'm only seeing, I'm trying to see if there's names that I recognize, but so far I haven't seen any. But anybody knows me and knows where the bodies are buried, you're sworn to secrecy. All right. So what I thought, I'm going to run through a few of these. Okay. Can you see the screen okay?
Yeah, we've got it, Bob.
Okay, great. So
unclear.
I've tried to organize them in a way that would allow me to go through them somewhat sequentially. I probably will fail miserably at some points in that, so it may go back and forth. But and I just kind of ran out of time doing that as I was working through that today. I got called and pressed into service for doing a little bit of repair to our runway this morning. We're actually putting this product called True Grid down. It's a plastic matrix that we put over the top middle of the runway, and then we roll over it with a big roller, and it presses in, and the grass is supposed to go through it and stabilize the dirt underneath. So, but I'll get to where I live now a little bit too. But so I was going to give you a little bit of background on me. I started flying in 1977. I was pulled into aviation. I always had an interest, but not a real knowledge of how to dive in, or didn't really know any pilots, up through high school until I met one of my good friends there, whose dad was building a Stearman in his garage and had a Bonanza V35. And he gave me my first airplane ride, introduced me to my first flight instructor. And these are the airplanes that I got my basic ratings in. Got the private in the Cessna 150, the instrument in the Grumman Cheetah. Believe it or not, I took half of my commercial check ride in this J3 Cub. Did all the maneuvers in that, and then had to fly a Cardinal across the bay and back to get to do the gear up, gear down part of that check ride. And I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Learned how to fly at Palo Alto Airport in the Bay Area, just south of San Francisco. After I got my private license, as I was building the other ratings, I took a job as a as a line boy for a Palo Alto Flying Club. And part of the deal was there, I got to ferry. They did maintenance at San Carlos. So I did a few extra hours ferrying airplanes from Palo Alto to San Carlos, which took about 5 minutes each way. Then I got my multi in that Cessna 310, which was a 310 Golf, has the old tuna tanks, like the original Sky King.
Yeah.
That airplane, for those who are maybe just learning how to fly now, that airplane was $75 an hour, air, tack, wet. So it had an air switch and it was off the tack and it was wet at 75 an hour. And I washed and waxed that thing for $100 to get it down. I bought 10 hours for $650.
The good old days.
In the good old days, absolutely. The Cessna 150 was $12 an hour wet, and the instructor was $10 an hour. Those were definitely the good old days. All right, so okay, let me just do this. I was an aero major at San Jose State, and when I graduated, I joined the Navy, and I think it was 3 days later after graduation. Flew the T-34 Charlie, it's a slightly younger version, a lot thinner version, but flew the T-34 Charlie, the T-2 Buckeye in the lower right, and the TA-4 Skyhawk. Got my wings in that squadron, the Red Hawks of VT-21, and stayed there as an instructor. And then I had what I think is every 1980s guy dream come true, and got to fly the F-14. Me trying to be a badass with a mustache, right? You know, I actually was in training in the Tomcat when they'd filmed Top Gun, and the movie came out just as I got to my squadron. And yeah, I think we were flying Tomcats out of Miramar during the Reagan years was probably about as good a deal as you could ever have gotten in the Navy. We used to say the 4 best jobs in the world are President of the United States, which maybe has even lost a little bit of luster and dropped off this list. But I'd like to see it return to that glory, though. But President of the United States, movie star, professional athlete, and Miramar Navy fighter pilot. So we had no ego whatsoever, right? Was on active duty with the Navy for 7 years, and then left active duty, stayed in the reserve for another 23. Most of that was in air command and control for amphibious assaults. And I got mobilized as an 06 in that capacity and got to go be with the Marines in the desert during OIF in 2003. But during that time as a reservist, I also flew as a commuter airline pilot, flying Bandits and Jetstreams for West Air. Then I took a job flying. I was contract corporate in a Twin Otter, and then I flew air ambulance in a King Air. Then I got a job flying a Citation, and that was a full-time job. The others were kind of scrambling for money jobs. And then in 1998, I was hired by Southwest, and that's my wife and I in the first 737-700 simulator that had video but didn't work yet. So that's where 24 years at Southwest, just an awesome time. The middle picture there at the bottom is the time when I got mobilized. So a couple of Southwest guys out there showing off our time there in the desert. And then, along the way, during the time that I was on active duty, the whole world of general aviation and specifically experimental aviation took off in a direction that I never, ever knew was happening. So I missed many, many years. And in 2007, a fraternity brother of mine called me up and said, "You need to buy my other airplane." Matter of fact, I need to pull up a couple of pictures. So I'm do this picture. This is the dangerous part when you pull up your whole round of pictures, right? Because you never know what you're going to see. But Bobby Gross called me up, and we went and flew his F-1 rocket, which is a beautiful example of an F-1 rocket. This is a lunch in Sebring, Florida. And then a couple of years later, he called me up and said, "You need to buy my other airplane." I said, "Well, what the heck is that?" He said, it's an RB6. And I always thought after I flew this, I said, man, wouldn't it be neat if they made an RB6 or 7 that had a big motor like Bob's F1? And because I live in Reno and it would be nice to have that. And it'd been a long time since I'd flown general aviation. So my confidence and trust in small motors, I still didn't know where experimental was. But he said, I've got this, it's RB6, but it's a special RB6, has a 540 in it. I went, what? He said, yeah, there's only 2 or 3 of them that's been made like this. This is the second one ever made. He said, I started a panel upgrade, but I painted it. It looks really cool. So you should buy it. I said, well, I sure as hell hope you painted it red. Yep. He painted it red. And as you can tell from the flames, he's one he was very prone to hyperbole. So that's the airplane that I bought in 2007. And I can honestly tell you that it changed my life. It changed my wife's life. It put us in a direction that I never expected. My wife really never expected that level of addiction to take place, but there it is. And the airplane was, I guess I could bring that back up. This airplane was, oh no, I have some other pictures. Yeah, sorry. See, I'm gonna try to keep it together. So as I became an RV owner, it was this airplane that I bought. I wish they'd show bigger. So this was Tom Hallendorf's Super 6. This is a photo from a sport aviation magazine article that was written on it, I think in either 99 or 2000. And Tom had built an RB4, wanted to build an RB6 that was based on a Harmon rocket or like a Harmon rocket. And John Harmon really didn't want to tool up for a side-by-side rocket. And Vans didn't want to touch it, of course. And so he and his EAA chapter in San Francisco or the Bay Area set out to build this. And they basically built it, with a one of a kind, or they built a few of the engine mounts. So, but it's a first of its kind engine mount that for this airplane. They stretched the fuselage 10 inches in the back and used 40,000 skin in some places. There are thicker stringers between the longerons. There's a lot of beefing up that they did to the airframe. The wings are clipped 7 inches on each side, just like the Harmon rocket or the F1 Sport rocket. His airframe work was outstanding. Where he excelled there, he may have fallen back or maybe just invested a little less into systems. And there's the original panel. Which when Bob was asked to do a pre-buy inspection on it after Sun and Fun, he took the prospective buyer out. They looked at it, and the other buyer walked away and said, "Yeah, I don't think so." And Bob said, "Well, if you're not buying it, I am." And then Bob bought it, started the panel upgrade, and when I bought it, you can see this is just before paint, and while he was doing his panel upgrade. And he hadn't quite finished a few of the things here. My first time in the cockpit when he started checking me out, I had no idea what a pre-buy was, but we went out. He's an A&P and an American Airlines pilot, and was a phenomenal builder. So he was working through all this, but I jumped in and said, "Bob, why are there 5 throttles?" You can see all of these guys here, and it's throttle prop mixture. This one was ram air door, and this is cabin heat. And I said, "Why in the heck did he do that?" And he said, "Well, he probably just had extras lying around the hangar, so he used those." And to me, that's not the best ergonomics. But I bought the airplane and brought it back. Let me see. First, this is, I think, day 1 of our cross country on the way out. I had a Reno Air Race t-shirt on, which I had no idea that would be in my future. And then landed in Reno. And as my wife drove up, she came up from behind, and it looks really short wingspan from behind. And she said, "Oh my God, you're going to kill yourself in that thing." She had no idea about little airplanes, but she's grown to love it, just as I have. But this is my now 22-year-old and now 21-year-old on the first day that we had the airplane in Reno. And again, I had no idea that the sign above the airplane was going to come into play someday because people had to have P-51s to race at Reno, right? I hadn't been there in a long time. But I started my adventure in the RV, getting a place in the air race hangar because it was the only place that had an opening. You couldn't do maintenance in the hangar. You couldn't have tools in the hangar. You couldn't leave anything in the hangar. So I moved out of that pretty fast. But one of the things that I was going to go over a few of the maintenance items that happened over the years, just to make life exciting. So I had the airplane for about 3 months. And this is I started off being an RV owner with a tool kit that I bought at Costco of crescent wrenches and basically it fit in my truck so I could stay in that hangar and go work on the airplane. And then about 3 months into ownership, I was landing instead, and I turned off the taxiway, and I was in the left seat, and the right rudder in the left seat pushed forward. And I turned off the taxiway and did left turns into fuel and left turns to get back, and then called Bob up and I said, "Hey, Bob, does this airplane have adjustable rudder pedals that I don't know about?" And he said, "No." He said, "No, why?" And I said, "Because when I landed just now, the right rudder pedal went full forward against the firewall." He said, "Oh my God, there's a service bulletin about those things breaking." And I said, my answer was, "They have service bulletins on experimental airplanes?" So this is, you don't know what you don't know. And the adventure has been growing and growing ever since. What do they call it? Recreation and education. And it's been very much both for me. So I thought I would, I think that's all the pictures from this phase. Oh yeah, I'll do this. So that began my first somewhat major maintenance item. And this was the very first big gulp that I took because the build, yeah, you know exactly what's there, right? The builder did not split the Delrin blocks on the sides of the fuselage when he put them in. He built it into the fuselage, and the Delrin blocks would not come out. I couldn't. There was no angle that I could turn them to get them out, so I had to cut them out. So let me go to a different folder for my maintenance stories here, and see if I can find this one here. This is where I apologize for not having it a little bit more squared away. Yeah, that picture seems to have lost its spot. But my first experience with that was it was somewhat daunting, but the great thing about the community that we're in, as I pulled it off the runway and then pushed it back to the Rara hangar and started trying to figure out what was happening, 3 other RV owners came over at Stead and said, "What you got going on?" And they basically walked me through this whole process. And so my first big job was replacing the rudder pedals in an airplane, and I had no idea what I was doing. So, and I don't know if this is familiar territory or sounds familiar to all the builders out there. It just seems that over the years, each time there's a job where I've never been into that part of the airplane or never been into that system of the airplane, it's very, very intimidating. It may be getting less so over time because you can apply knowledge that you gain somewhere else to this new problem that you've got. But if it's the first time you've seen it, man, sometimes, probably the biggest one for me now is if I ever do a full panel upgrade myself, just getting through the rat's nest. I've done a couple panel upgrades, but with some very excellent help. That was, again, the process of becoming an RV owner, and that my wife still likes to tease me a little bit about when I bought the airplane and started the first panel upgrade, she said, wait, this is the airplane that you said needed nothing. And it's akin to probably an RV builder saying, I've just completed the airplane, I'm done. And everybody that's ever had an RV for more than a year says, yeah, you're never done. So I've proven that over and over and over again. So I don't know if I have any other RV pics in that one, but so some of the maintenance stories happened alongside other mods and things, but one that I'll go into first, my third year of racing, I think, we found in tech inspection a broken engine mount. Actually, that's the engine mount after we repaired it. A crack in the engine mount. And it was obviously very disconcerting. We ended up not racing that year, of course, because there's no way we get that done. And how come I can't find that picture? Yeah, no, at any rate, again, I apologize. I'm trying to make, oh shit, I'll do that. The engine mount, and I have a friend, Mike Thompson, who is the head of the Sport Air Racing League, which is the cross country league that a lot of RVs have raced in. He actually had a landing where his socket broke out of the engine mount, and it collapsed the right gear, and obviously damaged the airplane extensively. Damaged the right wing, damaged I think the prop hit. So there's all kinds of, it just was, what a big mess that would be. But this is the engine mount after we did the repair. And shit, I'm kind of bummed I don't have the pictures, but we actually added an extra truss down here in the lower right and one in the lower left that you can see back here. So we made it a much bigger truss construction. And then the gusset, on a normal RV6 is probably about this big. And the gusset here on mine is that big. So you can see that it was beefed up originally, and we beefed it up a little bit more. Why did I do that?
Hey, Bob, did it break down in that area that you beefed up? Is that where it broke at?
Yeah, and I have that picture to show you where the crack was, but the crack actually occurred right back. It was on the aft. It's not out here by the mounts, but it's in the back, just right about here where the arrow is, on the cross tube that goes right along the base of the firewall. And it looked like a paint crack, and the tech inspector looked at it, and we flexed the airplane a little bit and it moved. So he scratched it off, and sure enough, it was cracking. So I probably would have left a landing gear as well, just like Mike did if I, on a next hard landing. Really, really fortunate to have good people looking at your airplane all the time. I was going to go over some of the speed mods next, but one of the things that happened that was another major maintenance was I owned a Glass Air for 3 years, and while I was racing it, my buddy James Stringer from the UK was racing my RV6. And I happened to be the pace on this flight, and I was in Mark Frederick's F1 rocket about 1,500 feet above the race course, right above where James was being tracked down by Jason Rovey in his RV8. And they went around sport pylon 4 and 5, and James said 49's a mayday. And that's our standard call. We say mayday, and we pull off the course, and then we start turning back to the left in order to find a runway to land on. And James just kept tracking straight away from the runway. And I came up on the radio and said, pace is at your 6 o'clock high. Let me know if you need to chase. And he said, 49's a mayday, bird strike. So I knew it wasn't an engine failure. I knew it wasn't something else, but I didn't know what kind of bird strike he had, whether it was the wing. And for a fleeting moment, I said, "Oh well, there's going to be some work on my airplane." But I stayed in character as the pace and followed, chased him until he did a great job, landed safely. As you can see, some of the shards of glass, or maybe the Falcon's claw hit him on the face as he went through, snuck under his visor, which he had down during the flight. But it took out a big chunk of the left wing windscreen, and the damage to the rear of the airplane, where it hit below the baggage compartment, it hit so hard that it buckled the top skin, like you can see right here to the right of the canopy rail. So had that come through the left windscreen, he would either been killed instantly or probably would have been knocked out and died, because he was at 50 feet over the ground in the race when it happened. So he and I started, he came out and helped a few different times, but we started taking the airplane apart. This is the day that I learned how to drill out rivets. You can imagine the fun of that. That's not the one I wanted. That's a little later in the process. But we got the back skin off, and again, it's one of those times when it's like, well, I've never built an RV6 or an RV, so I've done a lot of work, but I don't know what it's going to take to put it all together. So it was a 100-day project. That happened on September 16th. We got the back skin off, we got the windscreen off, and then we started the repair process. And then this is where we grew the porcupine of Clecos to get that back skin back on. And then James came out for a visit, and being a little bit smaller in stature, he was the guy stuck on the inside with the bucking bar, and I was the guy on the outside with the rivet gun, and we riveted it all in place and then got it painted. So the process, and you'll see a couple of the mod screens that I bring up in just a little bit. As I painted things, a big part of the process was saving the stripes that you saw on that first picture when I pulled up how he painted it. We have it all covered up here. We're starting to put the windscreen back on after we got the skin on. And then I went through the process of trying to do just a really, really nice job. There's a gent 2 doors down from me who's a kind of a guru RV builder, had a really, really nice technique for getting fine lines, including, big tape to keep the paint and everything off, and then small tape for fine line adjustments and stuff. So I went through that process quite a bit, and built up the foredeck, the area in front of the windscreen, step by step by step, until it was ready to shoot. And then it was cover it, save the paint, the $1,000 a gallon flame paint, this would have been the third time that when you see my cal mods, you'll see where I was talking about there. And this was the day that I found out that you actually can shoot paint in 34-degree weather. If you warm your hanger up to 70, pull it out, shoot it fast, and get it back in, you can pull it off. So that was an interesting process, but it ended up coming out actually quite nice. You can see just a touch of difference in color. Red is really hard to match, but that was we're starting to get things back together. It's always fun to do body work. And again, it flew on Christmas Day that year. So it was hit by the Falcon on September 16th and flew on Christmas Day. So let me see. I think that's all I've got in that. I know that people are interested in some of the speed mods that we've done over the years. When I bought the airplane, I started doing Sport Air Racing League races, and the airplane had an RV6 tail when it was built, which you can see there. And John Huft, probably he had the fastest RV8 at the time, and Dave Anders, who a lot of people are familiar with and has the fastest ever RV4, I believe, came up next to me at Air Venture Cup, slid in on one side of me on the picnic bench, and one slid on the other, squeezed their shoulders against mine and said, "When are you putting a counterbalance rudder on the airplane? You are going way too fast not to have one." And there have been a few guys that have put RV6. There's a rocket guy and an RV6 guy who put a counterbalance rudder on an RV6 tail. It looks beautiful. I didn't quite have that skill set. And the guy that was 2 doors down from me was a multi-time RV8 builder. So we actually put an RV8 tail on the RV6. And it actually worked quite well. We put an extra washer underneath the front attach point to change the incidence just a little bit on horizontal stab, and everything fit, even the fairing fit. I was shocked, but I think I actually lost a mile an hour or two on that. So I ended up cutting the top of the fiberglass off and making a flat top on the counterbalance and the fin, which was a Tom Martin of fast rocket fame modification. So that was one of my first metal projects. Over the years, we started talking about cooling drag, and a lot of you have probably seen the Vans Air Force post by Dan Horton called The Shrinking Exit. And there's an incredible amount of information there in that thread. And I've talked to Dan a few times, and Steve Smith, who's the guy that I'm building the tapered wing with, and I talked quite a bit about different ways to improve the speed of the airplane by working on induction and exit and cooling drag. So one year we decided that we were going to try to go to a Sam James inlet, because the original builder, see if the, I don't know if it's going to show very well. The original inlet and exit, I think, were built just in a way to fit. It was an oval shaped ram air inlet that would open up to let straight unfiltered air into the RSA 5 servo. And the normal induction was in the right inlet. See there, you can see the oval shape there just a little bit, with it straight down off of the cowling in the front there, which can get a lot of turbulent air off of the propeller spinner. So the normal induction inlet was in the right inlet with a filter that dropped down through a scat tube that went into the side of the homemade inlet, that then they would open the door here. And it worked, but it was probably very inefficient. I think when I opened the rammer, I'd get 2 inches because the normal induction was pretty slow, pretty circuitous and a little bit draggy. So we went to the Sam James inlet mod, and the first step was taking a big breath, just like cutting your rudder pedals out, and cut a hole in there so that we could start to work with the Sam James inlet. And then one day I had my first chance to play with, I got to do this. You're not seeing all that. It was my first chance to do expanding foam to carve down for a shape. I might have overdone it just a little bit. But so I guess I hadn't shown that. So that's the cut with the Sam James raw cowl inlet there. And then we started working step by step to hone this down. I changed propellers at the same time from the Hartzell D-twist to a Hartzell blended airfoil. And I went from a Hartzell spinner to a Van spinner, and the Hartzell spinner had an 1.25 inch back plate, and I think the Van's back plate is either 3/8 inch or 5/8 inch. So it left a 1 inch gap that we had to fill. And so we did that with the ring of foam there and glassed it all in. As you can see here, here's what it looked like before we started glassing in the foam. We got the inlet mod started. We said, oh my God, what are we going to do there? So that's when we used that ring and continued to work it, started to glass in the bottom. Things started working out, shaped up pretty well. A lot of grinding on the foam to get it to the right angle based on the offset on the engine mount. And here's another step where we started to complete the glass in, and then I used an old rocket spinner as a way to get the glass to lay in nice and tight on the inside. And then what Scott taught me, the guy 2 doors down taught me, was as I started to try to smooth everything out here, we want to get this gap nice and tight. And so we'd do a layup where I did, a layer here, 2 layers here, 3 layers that long. And we basically little by little got the thing to where it was nice and flat and built up into a nice shape for a final there. So that's what it looked like when we were done. We were real pleased with the shape there and the way things turned out. And the new propeller, going from a Hartzell D-twist to a Hartzell blended airfoil, gained 5 miles an hour. Pretty impressive propeller. I'll come back to this little section a little bit later. So that was 1 year. Then the next year we said, okay, we really want to hit the cooling drag side. And Steve Smith he's a PhD aerodynamicist and had looked at everything that Dan Horton did, everything that Dave Anders did. And what we measured and looked at was, here's another big gulp day. The way this inlet's shaped, it's canted forward at the bottom, which is basically was just puking out air. And whereas Van's inlet to exit ratio or exit to inlet ratio is 1.2 to 1. It's a really good all around cooling. It's good for slow climbs. It's good for fast. It's a good all around ratio for all around performance, just like the rest of the airplane. But this was increased to 1.86. They didn't measure it, but I think they just cut it off until they could get cooling, because they must have had a little bit of trouble cooling the big motor in the smaller cowl. It's not super tightly cowled, but it's probably a bit more tightly cowled than an average RV. But so we cut the base off and started working on a plan to reshape it to make everything more aerodynamic. Whereas Steve had said this outward flow of the exit sides was bad. The slanted out on the sides was bad, and the cut forward was bad. He said everything about that exit is bad. So he designed one that would be a little more aerodynamic and would flow better. And we basically took it down to the lowest size we could fit around exhaust pipes, which I had to redo, and I'll show you that. So we started working here with how we put foam in and started carving that down. And at the same time, I started working on an exhaust modification. And what the idea here started out is we had side-by-sides 3 into 1. They were pretty far apart at the back because the gaskelators here and other things are in the middle. And they were canted down at a really, really steep angle. Probably it looks like almost 45 degrees, right? From level, maybe 40 degrees. So, and in reading books like, I think it's Kent Pazer's Speed with Economy, the optimum angle for exit flow is 10 degrees, 7 to 10 degrees. So we started about trying to figure out how to make the exhaust pipes cant inward, come together smaller so we could put a smaller exit around it and then make them come out at a 7-degree or 10-degree angle. And a very good friend who's a welder there at the shop, he does sports cars. He's got some really cool sports cars, helped me cut and then add a little extension in and then turn them the way we wanted them. And he was just a brilliant guy, helped me set it up just right and ended up with 2 exhaust pipes that were shaped the way we wanted. And that's one of the cool cars he had in his place there. So we got that part done, brought it back over to the airplane, installed it, and at the same time tried to clean up the firewall quite a bit. The way the airplane was built, the boost pump is up here. It's over on the firewall. It's just back a little bit of ways. And all of this kludge of fuel lines took it out of the boost pump, fed the gascolator, and then fed the mechanical pump. I mean, that, like I said, his airframe work was really good. His systems work was still not quite as along the same par as his airframe work. So I pulled that off and I installed an EFII boost pump, and that kludge of pumps and everything, actually this is upside down. That kludge of pumps that that was in there on the firewall, all this was on the firewall, was turned into this up on top. Kind of a neat little thing. That's the Robert Paisley's EFII boost pump, and the filter went in the cockpit. That allowed us to bring up the exhaust pipes quite a bit. I built this stainless steel belly pan, which came out of a radius, a firewall radius, which is another thing that the RV8s all have a firewall radius and the 6s and 7s don't. And Steve said that will be one of the things that will make your exit flow the best, is that firewall radius. So we worked on putting that on right in the middle of the only place that it would fit. It, and we were dropping it down. That's just a little bit narrower than the actual exit is. I think I had some pictures of the installation process there. Basically took stainless steel and rolled it on a broom and let it spring overnight. And I came back and it actually sprung open to exactly the 3-inch radius I wanted. And I built a angle piece to go to the firewall, put a little fiber frax here and a little fiber frax there, and then covered it in Pro Seal because I didn't want the exhaust and fuel and things to come in and basically start to separate that after we riveted it on. And it ended up in place. Where'd it go? Apologies. Like that, once it was riveted on. So again, the process of taking the floor ribs and drilling out rivets there was a bit daunting, but over time we figured it out and it worked out nice. Interesting thing is, the best laid plans don't always work out. And that first design of the exit area, we were a little aggressive in bringing it in and a little tight. You can see right here where the exhaust pipes touch the inner curve of the exit area. And that's a self-healing problem because it'll burn its way through and you'll be done. You'll have nice big holes in your cowl if you don't fix that. So we ended up setting out to repair this area here and make it a little shallower angle and get at least 3/4 of an inch separation from the exhaust pipe to the cowling. And I started out trying to do that with some expanding foam. I went on a 3-day trip after I laid this up and then came back and it was all melted and crap on the ground. So I ended up creating some dams, if you will, and bent them until they all fit in the right place and went all the way back so that I could then lay up some fiberglass on them, and ended up with that layup that turned into several other layers of fiberglass, and then we were able to trim it to the right shape. As I did this mod, you can see we started viewing multiple layers of glass here on the two sides. We'd had all this done, and I found a shortcut. Instead of having to do one layup per day, I could do 2 to 3 if I used a composite friend. He's a guy who did a lot of composites there instead. He said, you can use my oven. So I did that, and I don't have any pictures of the scariest day of this process. But one day I pulled it out, and it was, instead of being a nice square cowling bottom, it was a parallelogram because the whole thing had gotten too hot and fallen towards the side. And I brought it back. He started using these wires to bring everything together and dammed it up against the sides and got it back to square. But this picture is to show we took a really heavy overbuilt cowl that was built, and you can see where it was extended right here for the extra cylinder in the 6-cylinder motor. And we just tried to clean that up. And after several steps of that, we ended up with a really nice interior cowl that flowed the air a lot better after all that work. One thing I did find after we closed that exit down to 0.75 to 1, we actually picked up 5 miles an hour, might even have been 6. And but in takeoff and climb, in climb and in slow flying, like we do in formation, the engine would, the oil would get hot and the engine would get hot. So I ended up buying one of the anti-splat aero cowl flaps, and the installation went nice and clean. It was a really nice piece of gear. I'm really happy with the way that turned out. And it it slows down by about 5 miles an hour, 5 knots in cruise. But when closed, you pick that right back up. And when it's open, I never have cooling problems, never have oil cooling problems in normal ops. Maybe on super, super hot days, but I climbed faster to recover from that.
And Bob, that's just one cowl flap, is that right? Just on one side?
That's correct. Yeah, I put it, I'm sorry, I should have had a better picture there. I basically put it right in the middle. Here's a picture of after it's installed. So I redid the fiber flax and the heat shield and put the cowl flap in there. And it's done a real credible job. At one point we redid, this is an RV bits cowl, because the original plenum that was on was really rough, and the baffles were actually quite homemade and not very effective. So I started my own baffle project and ended up with a real nice set of baffles and a real nice plenum that to this day has been working quite well. I know we're getting towards an hour, so I'm trying to brush through this so we can talk a little bit about racing stuff too. At one point, hang on a second, I have an internal. Hey, Tina, Richard just texted that your trunk is open. Ended up getting some new brakes and wheels from Robbie Grove, and at the same time decided to make an adjustment to the wheel pant. This wheel pant had been built actually quite a, you can tell my wheel pants are fairly low on the wheels, but this one was dropped down a little too low, so they weren't quite in line. So this was the process of bringing them into alignment and making a little change to the fairings I had. And that's kind of the completion project of painting all the gear leg fairings, doing the repairs, and trying to get your trunks open. So here's some of the repair work, and then you saw the paint work there. So that's been an issue. We've tried a lot of different tail wheels over the years. This is the tail wheel I race with. This is a Dayton Murdoch 4-inch tail wheel. That's a Dayton Murdoch 5-inch, and that's a Van Standard tail wheel. I've actually, during the races, on one year, I tried using a roller skate wheel like the formula racers do. And it did not survive the taxi out and the taxi back. It was coming off the rim by the time I got back to the chocks, but nothing bad happened to the tail, fortunately. A lot of you have heard about the tapered wing project that we've been working on. I've kind of burned a lot of time already, so I'll hit some of the highlights. It started in 2014 after Steve and I did an episode of Mythbusters together, where we proved that you could fly in a certain formation and save fuel like the birds do in there. Anyway, so if you ever want to see that, Google the Mythbusters episode called Toilet Bomb, and because Jamie and Adam proved the lethal weapon thing that they did, where they were sitting on a toilet, had the bomb, they jumped into the bathtub, but we proved that you could fly in formation and save fuel with 9 airplanes in a V formation. It's pretty cool. But he had an idea, or he had designed a tapered wing. Steve is the designer, or the consulting designer on the RV-10 wing, the RV-14 wing, and the RV-15 wing. And he told me about his concept for a tapered wing that would be good for racing, and asked if I was interested. And I said, well, of course I'm interested. And so we started that process back in 14. And from the very beginnings of just building the molds, this is learning how to spray Duratec into the molds after we've built them, and bit by bit making ribs, and then putting them to the right size, putting the bevels in, and putting them together that way, and then covering them with carbon. And I wish these thumbnails were bigger. I apologize. So this is the wing with the spar in it and all the ribs in carbon. That's the one I just showed you. The day that this is the ribs and the spar put into place with corner tapes. So they're put into place on one of the ribs, or I'm sorry, on one of the wing skins. And then we put corner tapes on the other side of all the ribs. And then on the day that we closed them, here's all the schmoo that we used. The tanks have been had sealant put in them. The aux tank has sealant put in it. This is the aileron bell crank mechanism. So you can see that's the skin and the ribs there. And then we did the same process on the other skin that was then, we had it all marked where it needed to go onto the structure. Put all the schmoo, it's epoxy resin, flocks, Cabacil, and microballoon mix that then you flip over and put it onto the other side. I just show you where we had it closed. This is after we closed it and have the older mold on top holding it down, and Steve checking for all the squeeze out. And just trying to give you a late view of how it's looking nowadays. We've been doing a lot of work on them recently. This is fitting the aileron hinges. It's a center hinged aileron. So there's the aileron spar just before we closed them up. Apology. Oh, here's a better picture. Here's a fairly current status. The flaps are on. The inboard portion of the flaps have not been trimmed yet, because that will actually be trimmed when we get it here to Texas and put it on the fuselage on the airplane, and we bring the flaps up and find out where we need to trim them to the fuselage side. The ailerons are on. We have closed them since then and put the aileron spars in, and done a lot of work on that. The tips have been cleaned up. The cover plates for the inspection panels have been, we put a lot of Bondo on them and trimmed them down to the shape of the wing. But we're just getting ready to finish up there. And hopefully by the end of April, we'll have them back here in Texas for final fit and finish.
Hey, Bob, is that kind of the same process they use on like the Extra 300, a composite aerobatic airplane like that?
I would think so. It's an interesting process to build a hand-built set of wings. It's I would call it plans built in a sense, or almost scratch built, but from the very early beginnings of laying up skins to building all of the parts and pieces. We've consulted with a guy who's built several legacies, and so like the tank sealant we used is the sealant they use. It's a Rhino Linings product now. It's an aviation product that Rhino bought, but all the way down to, here's a layup of spar doublers with the hinges on the inside, and there's been a million steps, and Steve has been really, really happy with the process, in that the measurements in his plans, we're ending up with very close tolerances and very close to his original plan on after 7 years of hand building these wings. So that's been kind of neat for him to experience and for me to watch and learn. I've been the apprentice up there for a long time. The results of all the speed. Here's my second year in Reno, and this guy, it was a fixed gear radial rocket that I was able to qualify about 3 miles an hour faster, and he made the mistake of saying in earshot of my crew chief that he hated that I flew down low because he couldn't see me and he didn't like being down that low. So as you can see after that, that's exactly where I went, right at the top of the pylons. There's another picture of RVs at Reno. This was just posted in Facebook. It's a picture from one of the photographers there. He said, it's the 2 fastest RVs in the world. I'm not sure we can fully claim that title, but I will say that this is me passing him. So I'm liking that part. I had the opportunity to race a Thunder Mustang for a couple of years of a friend. That was a blast, another composite airplane. I owned and operated the Glasser that I told you about. And the neat thing about both of these pictures is with a silver spinner, you get a neat reflection. And if you can see right here, you can see the ground reflected in the spinner right here. So it just shows you that we're pretty low, having a pretty good amount of fun. I was able also to race an L-39 for a couple of years, and that's an amazing shot that one of the photographers got there. So I've kind of blabbed and wandered just a little bit. I wanted to share a lot of those things, but I also wanted to open up to questions and answers. I know we're an hour in right now, and if you guys want to keep playing and doing a little Q&A and just kind of hanger flying, I'm happy to do that. So let me know what you guys would like to do.
Yeah, let's hang on for a little bit here. I got a couple of questions for you, Bob. What kind of speeds were you getting on these airplanes? Out of the Glasair and the Super 6 and everything?
So the 6, my speeds over the years, the first year I raced the 6, I think I was at 242 miles an hour for my qualifying time, which is, the best of 2 laps around the course. So it's obviously, it can be wind aided or wind subtracted, if you will. But so 240, low 240s in the first year. That my first Sorrel race was at Pagosa Springs, and I was in the high 230s. And then some of those mods started taking effect. It came back the next year with a little better technique and maybe a little faster airplane. It was in the high 240s during that Sorrel race. Over the years, I've built the speed from high 240s into the mid to low 250s. And then my fastest year before last year was I went out on a 4-way GPS test run and was at 258 miles an hour and qualified at 257 miles an hour. And then last year, as we're building the wings, it looked, we knew the wings wouldn't be ready last year, and it looked like the field was going to get very, very competitive. And a lot of guys have been starting to throw nitrous at the airplanes, and I really didn't want to do that. But I thought it through, and then I found out about a product that Don Rivera has at Airflow Performance that's a kind of a prepackaged nitrous system that I ended up buying from him, and I had to show you a picture of that because it's kind of neat. And we ended up qualifying at 261 miles an hour last year, and the fastest race average speed that we had during the week was 263. But some of the GPS speeds that we saw to get those speeds were actually 280 miles an hour in the Valley of Speed. And I did some testing at about 8,500 feet DA here in Texas with the nitrous system before going out, and I was able to get at 8,500 feet. I was able to get 274 miles an hour true airspeed. And there might be some questions about V&E, which I'm happy to talk about too. Let me get that. It was in the induction. So this is, no, it's not. Yeah, here's Don's system. You can see it has a kit plate here in the back with the nitrous injection and the fuel injection, and it's called the wet nitrous system, and it injects just enough nitrous and just enough fuel at the right mix to supplement by either 50, 100, or 150 horsepower. And I chose the smallest nozzles for 50 horsepower because I felt that I could cool it, but I needed to add water sprayers on top in order to do that. And we were adjusting our water coolers on top constantly during the week, trying to figure out how to best cool the cylinders. And you change one thing and it changes a couple others. So we worked it out, and we thought we had it dialed in for the Sunday race. And as I taxied out for the Sunday race, my fuel pressure indicator from my old VM1000 went Tango uniform on me. And so the VM1000 has now outlived its usefulness, and I've decided to break into this again. I'm not doing the full panel upgrade, but I'm going to we're doing what it takes to move the D100 or the D10 that I had here over to the right side and put a EDM 350 engine monitor over on the left side. I had to make some panels to fill in those blanks there. So far that.
Did you share your screen? We're not seeing it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, we can.
Yeah, you haven't seen any of that stuff, huh? Yeah, I've been showing you all this stuff and not showing you a damn thing. I know what I didn't do. I had to double click it.
There you go. Now we got it.
So let me go back to this is Don Rivera's kit right here.
Oh.
So here's the kit back here that I mounted underneath the induction. I went to a Sky Dynamics cold air sump. You can see my old sump above that's all plugged up, at the new sumps here in an RSA. I went from the RSA 5 servo to an FM 300 servo about 2 years ago, and then this year we added the nitrous, which is here's the nitrous solenoid, here's the fuel solenoid, and you send fuel and nitrous to each of the two nozzles. And I chose the nozzle size for a 50 horsepower shot, knowing that I would have trouble cooling. I wanted to put enough horsepower to get some speed, but not so much horsepower that I couldn't do a full race on the nitrous that we could carry on board. There's some of the guys have gone out. Two RV8s have qualified in the 270s, but they both put about 150 to 200 horsepower of nitrous at their motor, and they could do that for 2 laps, but they can't do it for a full race. So I did what I could do for a full race.
How long is a full race? How many laps? How much time?
6 laps, about 10 minutes from gentlemen, you have a race till checkered flag.
Okay, yeah.
Hey, Bob, what does the nitrous do to the motor life? Does it significantly degrade it?
I guess it depends kind of answer. You know, I think if you're running 100, 150, 200 horsepower and you're not able to cool it, my goal was to be able to run 50 extra horsepower, which puts this at somewhere between 330 and 350 horsepower, maybe, depending on how much horsepower I'm actually getting from the motor, you know, after 2,000 hours. And it is a 2,000 hour motor. You know, that I wanted to keep my cylinders at or below 400. I maybe let them get to 405 by the end of the race. But if I'm starting to get any hotter than that, I would richen it up. And I use an air fuel ratio monitor, and I try to run at you know, 12.5 is best power. It's really hard to be at full power down low at 12.5. So I found myself running at 11.5 ish, but with nitrous, and almost 12 in that. With nitrous, the best air fuel ratio drops down just a little bit. You'd like to be about 11.8, and I could get to about 11. And I was hoping to be able to get to about 11.5 on that last day when my fuel pressure indicator crapped on me. So yeah, I think if your temperatures and your pressures are in the safe range, you're not degrading the life expectancy of the engine. You know, the guys that are throwing a bunch at it, I just don't know. You know, and I mean, I'm the president of sport class, so I'm kind of keeping an eye on everything that goes on and hoping that people aren't putting so much horsepower into their motors that they're going to exceed safe speeds. I won't say V&E, but the safe speeds that, you know, are capable in these airplanes. And because I think the Vans V&E numbers are conservative, and you know, as a manufacturer, I would keep them conservative as well. And I don't go cavalierly into that range. You know, my airplane was built quite a bit more strength measures than a stock RV6, obviously, with a 200 knot or a 200 mile an hour V&E. This one, my V&E is listed because it was built like a rocket. It's listed at 275 miles an hour. I'm hoping to someday be able to do a level lap at 275 miles an hour to show you where my head is. So
yeah,
I'm at 261 right now, 263 on an average speed on a really bumpy day, actually. But where we really have to watch out is in the chute at Reno. It's Mark Frederick had flutter in his tail during a start in the silver, and I ended up in the silver this year too, and we had to talk them down in their approach speed or in their chute speeds. The dynamics of coming around Peavine, and we cross over the ridge on Peavine and start down the hill towards the chute. In the RV group, in the medallion and the bronze, we say we're going to come around Peavine at about 150, start downhill, and we're going to release at about 170. And that's not true airspeed. And the closer we bring people into the course, the less time they have at full power after being released. So we want to bring them in flatter, slower, and release them closer to the start position than what we had been doing when Mark had his flutter. He was in the silver. They were supposed to release him at 190, and we think that they released him at 226.
Oof.
So he was already going really fast when he went to full power, and he's coming downhill. and either the trim tab fluttered or the clevis pin for the trim tab and the horn broke off. But when he landed, the skin on the elevator was ripped from the trim tab forward almost to the spar of the horizontal stabilizer.
Wow.
And the trim tab horn and the back of the clevis was gone. We found some manufacturing issues with it. They didn't use the right number of rivets in it. He had some help in that section of the build. But when we rebuilt his tail, we built it with much stronger horn attachment. And he's actually gone to a Mark III tail with the F1 Rocket Mark III. And they embed the horn for the elevator trim tab inside the trim tab itself. So it's interesting to see all those. And we're going to incorporate a lot of those mods into a tail that we build. I'm going to build, actually in my hangar, have an RV8 tail kit for the vertical stab and the rudder, and an RV7 tail kit for the horizontal stab and the elevator. And we're going to build those with the same type of hinges that we're putting on the ailerons here. Rather than the rod end bearings, we're going to use the captured bearing aluminum hinges that we're going to put on it instead. So,
Wow.
So let me see. I kind of wandered on that question a little bit. Where, Doug, what?
I guess the question was, just speeds. How about the Glass Air? How's that compared to the RV6?
So the Glass Air was a pretty neat airplane. It had a TIO 580 that we ran at 67 inches of manifold pressure, and I ran it at, I think my best time was 359. Best speed was 359 miles
Oh
an
my
hour.
gosh, really?
Yeah, and I could never do better than third, because the first and second place guys, and now the first, second, and third place guys are running about 100 inches of manifold pressure, and they're hitting 400 miles an hour.
Really?
Oh,
Gosh, unbelievable.
One Legacy and 2 Glass Airs have either broken or approached 400 miles an hour.
Gosh, that's
So it's pretty neat. And the work that they've been doing to extract more horsepower out of the propeller and the engine is pretty amazing. And they've all blown engines too. Mine had a manual wastegate. I'm sorry, it had an automatic wastegate that would only let me go to 67. And that probably sounds kind of funny, right? And it had automatic ADI, anti-detonation injection or water methanol injection into the engine, and it had sprayers on top of the engine. So it was quite a machine. And then so that was a gold racer. The Thunder Mustang I raced was about 321 miles an hour. It was at the back of the gold, and the T30 or the L39 that I raced was top of the silver-ish type of L39, and I was at 437 miles an hour in that.
Yeah, wow.
It's really fun. It's very addicting. In the RV, I go out and do a race, and from takeoff to landing, it's 30 minutes, and I would put in $70 worth of gas. And I would do the same flight in the jet, and I would put $700 in it. And so we used to say, when you come to PRS, to Pylon Racing Seminar, bring your surgical tubing, because you're going to get addicted really fast. And if you go in the jet, you have to put one on each arm.
Yeah, right. Oh man, sounds great. God,
Yeah, fun.
Unbelievable.
So I mean, let's go to other questions. Anybody else want to chit chat or ask questions or anything about that? I know we've kind of been running a while, but what do you think?
well, Bob, just one thing. You were part of that huge formation group over Kansas City. Got any photos of that you could show quickly?
Sure.
And how many planes was that?
49.
Wow.
Let me see.
Were you in the V formation?
What's that?
Were you in a V formation?
No, it was actually a big arrowhead because it was over Kansas City Stadium.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So, and,
Yeah.
the amazing thing about that was Bill Gill, the lead. I'm down here as the lead of one of this 4-ship right here, but and you can almost see my wings are a little bit smaller than the others, and my my wingtip vortex is a little bit different than the others too. But Bill took off we had 50 airplanes on the runway. We all took off in 4 ships in diamonds, and we kind of got the formation in a big route structure where we were all a little bit more separated than we normally would. And he did some timing turns. And then on the last timing turn, when we knew it was time to go, he was just the right distance away. After one more turn, he would be at the exact hack that he needed to make the from here to there in the time necessary to be overhead at, I think it was, it even says content created 11:58:58 was our flyover time. That NFL runs it that tight. They gave us 11:58:58.
To this K.
Wow.
And he hit it exactly with 50 airplanes on, 48 other airplanes on his wing. And it was amazing. And we practiced it before that. And during the event, there was an Air Force general at Lee Summit Airport, which was the airport that we took it off and landed out of.
One
What's
over
that?
Kansas State Stadium. Must have been during the playoffs or something.
No, it was a game. I think it was a game against Seattle. It was, it's in October because it was pink smoke for the breast cancer awareness, because October is when they do that. And it was a fundraiser for a few local hospitals. Pretty neat. And the formation hung together. You can see on the left side of the picture, the right wing, they're a little bit more spread, but they were working their butts off. Just before we got there, we got hit by a bump. You can see kind of bumpy smoke in the background. Got hit by a bump and they got tossed out a little bit, and they worked really hard to get back in, but it looks pretty awesome when we fly over.
Yeah.
And then we flew over the stadium, flew over downtown and started southbound, split up into 4 ships in trail, came into the break and landed. And an Air Force general heard about the plan, watched the brief and said, there is no way you guys will be able to do this safely. And when we landed, and it was the takeoff, the join up, the flyover, the split up, and the recovery was absolutely per brief. And we landed, and he said, that's the damnedest thing I've ever seen.
Nice.
That's great.
So I know I have, okay, I'm going to go into the danger zone now, open up my normal photos and screen through, let me see, library. Anything you see may or may not be used against me in a court of law. So that was 2013.
Yeah, that would have been 9 years ago.
Yeah, really something. And for those of you who you may be among the first to know, it is Van's 50th anniversary. And we are planning a 50 ship flyover to open the show on Monday of Oshkosh.
Wow.
And then we're all saying, okay, here we go again.
Yeah, you can do it.
March, May, October. Oh, maybe we can get to do some of these in sequence. Here's one from overhead.
Oh, gee. Well,
Is that amazing?
That
You
is
can,
cool.
you can barely see it, but the airplanes are actually in the foreground.
yeah.
So there are benefits to being in a big flyover and football game.
That's right.
I even wore my KC shirt that day because everyone's a Kansas City fan when you do the flyover.
Yep.
Funny thing is the blonde to my right was, I said, oh, you get to do this again this year. And she said, oh no, that was my twin sister last year. Okay then. So here's what a hangar looks like when it has 49 airplanes.
Wow.
My gosh.
There's practice day. That's what it looks like when you're in it. This is Mark Delaney with his wife taking pictures. And here's this right here at the end of his wing is the canister holder for the smoke.
Great.
That's flying over on practice day. Isn't that something?
That is cool.
Here we are taking off for the real thing. Everybody's lined up. We get on, the first guys go, the next guys get out and go. We actually got everybody on the runway prior to takeoff though. And then one guy took off with his smoke on. What are you doing? Did it by accident. So there's that picture you just saw.
Oh, that's a good one right there.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
This is our 5 minutes of fame at the field. They let all the fat guys go out on the field for just a minute. A couple more pictures.
Wow.
They had a video of the top 10 stadium flyovers of all times, and we actually got number 1.
Did you really? Oh my gosh.
We did. And it was a world record. So that's our little world record thing right there. This is the bus that took us back, or took us to the game.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how'd you get all these guys together? I mean, what were their qualifications? How'd that come to be?
Everyone, I believe everyone in this group was FFI carded.
Okay.
There may have been a couple non-carded, but everyone in it was people that we had flown with, and we basically put it out very similar to what we're doing right now. Steve Payne, Shifty Payne is going to lead this 50 ship in Oshkosh, and Axel Alvarez, who just went to work for Vans and posts on Vans Air Force a lot. Axo, he's the coordinator, and he reached Shifty and Axel reached out to several of us in various geographic areas, and we reached out to our local area pilots. So we built the flight with I have 3 4-ships from Falcon Flight and 1 4-ship from Bulldog Flight in Georgia. The West Coast group is mostly West Coast Ravens. There's another group that's being built with Shifty's group in the Northwest and the Full Throttle team out of Georgia. I'm sorry, Bulldog is from Arkansas. He'd kill me for saying that, but so yeah, you end up building the team. This is what the lineup looked like for that flight.
Okay.
And everybody gave me shit because they said, "How come you got painted fingernails?" And I said, "As you can see, it's Cougar that's circled, and she's my number 4." So, but it was really a special event. It's hard to put something together like that. I mean, this is a picture from the TV helicopter for the game, or actually, I mean, from the blimp from the game.
Yeah. Oh,
Isn't that something? It's
Yeah.
just, it was, the smoke canister lasted for 3 minutes. So we fired them about a minute and a half out, and it burned over the stadium, and then a minute. And there's actually a YouTube video taken from the far side of the stadium, and there's announcing going on, and there's 3 things. All of a sudden, everything goes quiet, and then there's a few, "Hey, look at that! Oh my, and the crowd just goes insane. It was really, really cool. Pretty cool to be a part of. So, and I think it'll be a special event to be a part of for Vans this summer too.
That'll be great.
Yeah.
What did the
Right.
FAA think of that?
Say again?
Was that all coordinated with the FAA? Did they have any problems with it?
It's the local FAA FSDO in Kansas City was consulted. We did a 7711 for it, but that flyover got huge attention from the FAA, and stadium flyovers are now limited to 12.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's taken a long time to take place, and it's not really an official. It's really more of a guideline than a rule, like they say. But they had no idea the level of preparation and training that went into that flyover. They just said a whole bunch of people with airplanes they built in their garage just flew over the stadium, and they, for a while. Actually, there was some hoopla that came up even on Vans Air Force, and they said, you guys are creating a problem because you've brought attention to the fact that you're flying over densely populated areas. And right now, although it's only for takeoff and landing that they have the restriction, I mean, that they have the allowance for
Mhm.
densely populated areas in experimentals, we all do it all the time and nobody questions it. Nobody bothers us. But
Yeah,
if you
nobody
bring
knows.
too much, yeah. So over several years, we tried to get a 24 ship flyover over Levi Stadium, which is right off the end of the runway at San Jose International. The answer was no.
Yeah.
But it went all the way to DC to get it. And then the Patriots actually did it with a 3 ship. I was invited to fly with them and I wasn't able to do it because I was in Portugal helping put together another race. But I could have flown as number 3, but they all got letters for flying. And what they did it, they came in, landed at San Jose, waited till the appropriate time, and then took off and flew over the stadium because they did it as part of the takeoff, right? Yeah, they didn't buy it. So, but so they have reclassified stadiums as congested areas and open air assemblies. And so a flyover is still legal, but you have to mitigate flyover of densely populated areas on the ingress and the egress.
Mhm.
And honestly, every FSDO is different in how they monitor and enforce it. But honestly, the FFI community and those that have been doing flyovers have throttled back quite a bit to respect that and to do it in sizes and in a manner that is in keeping with the spirit of what the FA's put together. We've done a lot of work on doing that. So,
So you did it, we'll never see it again, huh? At least on a football game.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Unless we're able to get special clearance for that. And actually, this 50 ship that we're doing, we did a 50 ship over, that was a 49 ship. And then we did a 50 ship over Phoenix International Raceway, but it kind of was one big formation, but kind of wasn't. It was more 3 big diamonds with 2 little connectors in between, which is similar to what we're going to do at Oshkosh. That's going to be our first pass is 3 diamonds with connectors to make fit, because 3 16s is 48, then two connectors. And so it may not be considered a world record, but some people consider it the world record at 50. So this will be a tie of that. But Oshkosh and the FAA, they're very careful about what flies over, and everyone's going to be carded in that event. It's going to be in the waiver, so they have to be. We have a large formation flight lead qualification that has to be maintained by all of us that are fleeing the big diamonds and the entire flight. And we're going to practice quite a bit before we get there, both locally and then when we all get together. We practice the weekend before Oshkosh and then fly into mass arrival on Sunday. That's not a stadium, but it's an aviation event that has a waiver. So the stadium flyovers don't have waivers. So you have to be a little more careful about what you do there.
Great.
But what we're trying to do is prepare in a way and do it professionally enough so that everybody knows that there isn't going to be aluminum rain when all these airplanes fly.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Great.
You guys got any other questions about racing or flying or mods? And I know that the list is dropping smaller. So
That's right.
For
Anything else,
racing with
guys?
the RV,
Jeff, go ahead.
For racing with the RV, did you strengthen the vertical stabilizer spar? In the
Yes.
testing?
We put a 50 thousandths doubler on the aft vertical stab of the aft spar of the vertical stabilizer. And we did this, when Ken Kruger was still working at Vans, he would talk to us on the side, but he didn't want his name used at all on this. But we consulted with him and discussed it. So the aft spar has a 50 thousandths doubler on it. We asked if we should go to 25,000 skin, and he said, no, I really don't think you should do that, because now you're making the rudder heavier and you need more weight in the counterweight, and it makes the place where the counterweight connects to the rudder at the back a weak point. So we we actually pinned the stiffeners of the rudder together at the front to make them like mini little ribs. And that added 5 ounces of metal, 2 inches behind the hinge line. So we added 2 inches of shot, 5 inches in front of the hinge line in the counterbalance cup, just glassed it in.
Mhm.
And because of Ken's discussion about that weak point in the counterbalance, we put a 63 thousandths doubler in the corner there. Mark Frederick has actually taken it beyond that, and in the skin of the vertical stab right behind where the skin of the rudder right behind where the counterbalance goes in, he has a doubler put in there with a little kind of a diagonal shaped series of rivets that hold it all in. So we strengthened the spar, we strengthened the stiffness of the rudder, and those were two connected. By stiffening the rudder, we didn't want to transfer the failure point into the spar, so we stiffened that. And when we build the new tail, we're actually going to build stiffeners or a doubler and a thicker connection for the forward stabilizer attach point.
Okay.
And the horizontal spar is going to have some longer doublers and some other modifications in there as well.
Great.
And then one of the biggest mods is that the hinge, instead of 4 on the horizontal and 3 on the rudder of rod end bearings, all but 1 on each surface is going to be the type of hinge that we're putting in that aileron. And let me get a better picture of that. No, not that. Kind of bummed I didn't have a better organization of photos. That one. Sorry. This is the stubs bar that's going to hold it slides into this section here, slides into the wing root or into the wing spar itself, and then this section here goes into the cockpit just like the normal RV4 spar or RV4 and 6 spar goes.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a side note there. This one right here. So this is the style of hinge that we'll use on the tail. So it's a center mounted in, but instead of a rod end bearing that's adjustable here, we'll have 2 on the rudder and 2 on the horizontal stabilizer that are fixed position hinges like this that are much beefier, and then the other 2 will be a little bit beefed up rod end bearings so you can actually put it into place and slide it in. So that's one of the big strength measures that Steve wants to incorporate in the next tail.
I see. Yeah. Wow.
So Steve, one of the other questions, you bought this airplane, to go fast, but didn't, and now that you've done so much analysis on it with all the mods, were you, as you look back, are you concerned about the amount of analysis that was done on the first version of the plane that you bought?
It's a good question. I don't know what analysis was done by that. Their EAA chapter worked together pretty hard to do. I've seen a couple of diagrams that they used for the stretch in the fuselage behind the baggage wall, and it's stock length from the firewall to the baggage wall, and then stretched 8 inches behind. And they did calculations that found where they needed to put the bulkheads. Instead of just adding a bulkhead, they just stretched it out and used one-off bulkheads that they made that are very robust. And then the extra stringers and the extra. So they obviously put a lot of effort into it and some thought into it. And Steve has looked through in the years that he's known me and seen the things they did and thought they were well done, airframe wise. There are things that he has always thought could be stronger in a Vans product, and this type of hinge bearing is another one of them. But the van's design is intended to be all around performance and flown somewhat conservatively. I mean, that's probably not the right way to say it, but flown within limits is the way to say it. So yeah, the concept of exceeding V&E for a standard RV is something that a lot of people have talked to me about, and I've thought about it a lot over the years as well. Since this V&E was listed as 275, how fast did he test it? Now, I've tested it a lot faster than that.
Mhm.
But in controlled situations, and I haven't done hard bump tests on it at high speeds. Mark Frederick had one of his rockets in test phase have flutter. He describes the way you should test flutter as, start it downhill, get above the speed that you want to do the bump test at, whether it's a stick wrap or a rudder pop or anything like that, and then bring the nose up. And as it slows to the speed that you want to test, do the test. This guy was pointed downhill, accelerating through the speed, which I think was 215 knots at the time, and did a rudder pop and experienced flutter so bad that the counterbalance fluttered and broke and went to the side of the vertical stab.
Oh, wow.
And the twist in the airframe was so much that you could see big twists in the tail just around where the tail fairing goes, just forward of the horizontal stabilizer, twisted with big bumps in it. And when you took the fairings off, the bolts that held the forward stabilizer attach point had started to rip through that attach point, and they were probably held on with about an 1/8 inch of metal on each side, maybe a little less. So he came close to ripping his tail off.
Yeah.
So our tests have been very conservative. The hypothetical V&E of a van's product has been under the table said to be 300 miles an hour. I don't know that I would ever believe that in a normal situation or try to tell anybody they could fly that fast. This one, when we finish the mod with the wings, we're going to be doing extensive testing on, first flying characteristics. The first takeoff will be, as always with the first flight, okay, how's the rigging? Are the ailerons rigged to the point where I don't get a roll off? Climb out and do some basic fundamental tests and test some stick force gradient, see how things, if you trim to a certain speed and then accelerate, do you get the normal, I have to hold it back just a little bit. Or if you slow down, do you have to, I'm sorry, the other way around. If you speed up, do you have to hold the stick forward to maintain flight, or is it going to want to come up on you like normal? And if you slow down at a certain trim speed, does the airplane start to get heavier on the stick? So, there's a lot of things like that we want to test and go through, and then we're going to do some speed testing on it as well. And we'll approach that very carefully and methodically. So hope did that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's not, it's one I don't want to duck because, in a van's product, we're exceeding what the stock V&E would be. It's very much not a stock van build. And as we, a lot of what I've done over the years has been drag management. I've just started to do horsepower management with the nitrous, and it's getting close to where I'm going to need to do an overhaul on the engine or get a new motor for it. And, next motor is going to be, as powerful, but I probably won't go nitrous on it. I think, I've got a few more years of racing that I would like to do. And at that point, then I probably would be very satisfied with getting a new motor that would, another 300 plus horsepower. It's what the airplane has, and it'll be the most wonderful cruising RV6 in the world, I'm sure. But yeah, I will say that when you put the nose down, just like a rocket, if you keep the power up, it can get fast in a hurry. I mean, I've rolled it over at a 500 foot a minute rate of descent at cruise. So I'll do at 23 squared at 11.5 or 12.5. I can get about 205 knots at 10.9 or 11 gallons an hour. And you roll it over to at 24 squared, or I mean, at wide open throttle and 2,400 RPM, I can be over 210, 212 knots. And if I go up to 2,500 RPM at cruise up that high, I'll be about 215. So it's fast. And then so at 23 squared, if I roll it over and do a 500 foot a minute rate of descent, and maybe 700 foot a minute rate of descent, it'll get up to 230 knots like that. So, and I don't like to stay there. I'll back it up. That's when I'll start pulling the power back, and I'll descend at about 220 knots because it's still comfortable. It's where it's a racing speed, and as long as it's not bumpy, smooth air day, they're still comfortable speeds because they're below 200. So at 218 knots is 250 miles an hour. 230 knots is approaching that, 260 mile an hour. But I don't want to be descending at VNE. It's just not the right place to be. I'll race there under specific circumstances, but I don't want to do daily flight ups there. So
makes sense to me.
It's amazing. Very interesting. Thank you.
Well, any other questions, guys? Those that are left, we got a few left.
Hey, Bob, what,
Yeah.
One final Navy question. What carrier were you on?
Connie,
Which, oh, Connie, okay.
yeah, the USS Constellation.
I have a good friend I work with who was on the Ticonderoga who flew F-14s, but a few years earlier than you.
Wow. So what did he fly on Ticonderoga? That was before
Well,
he
he
was
flew-
in Comcast, probably, right?
Yeah, he was flying F-8s originally,
Yeah.
and then he moved to F-14s.
What's
He
his
was
name?
in Steve Marenshaw.
I bet I know people who know him.
The small world.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, where's Pete? We want to thank Pete as well for putting
Pete
this
still there?
together.
I'm still on here. Yeah,
There's a
Bob,
Okay.
thanks so much for doing this. We appreciate it.
I hope I didn't ramble too much or go in directions that you guys didn't want to go. It's just fun hangar flying with other pilots, though.
Hey, you beat Netflix this evening. It was very, very interesting.
Damn with
great,
faint
Bob.
praise.
Yeah, we appreciate
Thank
it very
you.
much. And I recorded this, by the way, for our group, so we'll get to see it, those who weren't here.
Yeah, I hope it's not too crazy boring flicking through all the pictures like that. But,
That's,
Fascinating.
hey, kudos to you guys for having such a phenomenal group that you've put together. And Doug, I know you've, like I said, Pete bragged on you a lot, and that you put this or helped build this group into what it is. And I think it would be incredible to have a support group of 300 pilots in the local area that you guys can all work together and play together and fly together. And, even though you let Pete in, I mean,
yeah, we did have to lower our standards for that, but we're very open-minded.
Yes,
For,
diverse
example of that.
inclusion.
what airports are most of you out of?
Where are we at? I'm in Lake Elmo. You guys are in Noka, right? What else? We
Yeah,
got?
Noka
Yeah,
County.
Pete and I are at Anoka. Paul Hove is at with Doug at Lake
Lake
Elmo.
Elmo, right?
Yeah, guys at Flying Cloud just south of Minneapolis.
I've heard a lot of guys at Flying Cloud and,
Yeah.
and Oak and all that. Well, someday, Pete, when we get through all the fray of trying to get the wings tested and done, and if I can get them to Oshkosh this year, it'd be fun. But I'll get up there to Minnesota and come and see you guys. Maybe you can tie it into one of your not virtual meetings or something.
That'd be
like that.
great.
Oh,
We'll do
we'd
it.
love it. As a matter of fact, on a trip out from Oshkosh, if that works, you just come west a little ways and then
Right on the
head
way.
south. Yeah, absolutely. We could arrange a nice picnic at our hangar.
We can do
That'd be
that.
fun. I'll have to. Pete doesn't know this yet, neither does Doug. But in the last 2 days, I found out that I failed retirement in 6 weeks. I took a G200 job for a local company here, but it looks like it's going to be a really, really neat job. Not a high task load, maybe 100, 150 hours a year, and
Too bad.
just enough to keep me in avgas and aircraft mods.
That's
Yes.
an idea.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
So if I can get that time off on the way back from Oshkosh, that'd be really fun.
Do that. We'll work it
Let
out.
us know.
You
Yeah.
bet.
Yeah. Let's keep in touch, Pete and
All right.
Doug.
All right, guys. Well, thank you. Thanks again, Bob.
Thanks again, Bob.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
Bill.
sign off,
Thank you,
guys.
Bill.
We'll see you.
See you guys.
It's great to meet all you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.